This Grade 2 star listed building in Norwich is the former Bethel Hospital, built in 1713, but the site it occupies was once a much older building known as Committee House. Committee House is no longer here because on the 24th of April 1648, this was the location of one of the largest non-nuclear explosions human beings have ever produced. 98 barrels of gunpowder went off under the building that was formerly there, and to put that in some kind of context, Guy Fawkes' plan to blow up the Houses of Parliament, the Gunpowder plot, intended to use just 36 barrels of gunpowder to achieve their end result. Incidentally, the event came to be known as the Great Blow. A little context is needed. The first part of the English Civil War had run from 1642 to 1646. King Charles, having more or less exhausted his capacity to keep fighting, sought shelter with a Presbyterian Scottish army at Southwell in Nottinghamshire, but he was eventually handed over by them to the English Parliament and imprisoned. That marked the end of the first part of the English Civil War. Change ends, new balls please. The war had been a devastating blow to the nation, one that nobody relished repeating. But equally, nobody was realistically looking to remove Charles completely from their plans for the country's future at the time. Thus, England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales entered a period now known as the Interbellum, literally the patch between the wars. There was a lot of politicking and a lot of horse trading. None of the many sides involved in the fighting were strong enough to impose their will over the others. Charles made the most of this. He flirted with the various factions involved in the war. Academic sources usually refer to Charles's behaviour at this time as coquetting, hoping to have himself restored to power. As this complex situation played out, there was a series of uprisings around the British Isles. There was one in Kent, then in Essex, then in Cumberland. There was a rebellion that happened in Wales, and in the summer of 1648, the Scottish invaded England, and there was a series of pitched battles and sieges. This is the environment in which our story takes place. There was a heightened level of paranoia, and indeed, the Civil War was about to restart, and when it restarted, it would go right the way through until 1651 and end with the execution of Charles I himself. So it was that on the 24th of April 1648, a riot broke out here in Norwich. Norwich's Mayor John Arting had been accused of using his position to promote royalist sympathisers, and Parliament sent a messenger up to meet with him to find out exactly what was going on. 2 gunshots were let off as a signal in the early hours of the morning. This incited a large crowd, estimated by those present as up to 1,000 people, to gather around the city's Market Cross at 9 a.m. Basically, the intention was to intimidate Parliament's messenger, who was meeting with the mayor at the King's Head Inn. The atmosphere was tense. Drums were being sounded around the city. Cries were heard along some of the streets, with people shouting, "For God and King Charles!
For God and King Charles!"
The crowds converged on the houses of leading supporters of the parliamentary side of the conflict. Those included the home of Alderman Adrian Parmenter. It didn't help matters that his home doubled as the hated excise office. Taxes had been increased to record levels to fund Parliament's war effort, and there'd already been a previous period of unrest caused by some of the increased excise that was placed on items such as meat and salt. In another part of the town, the home of the Sheriff, Thomas Ashwell, was surrounded by crowds. He was particularly unpopular with the local people because he was also a previous ex-New Model Army officer and the head of the local militia. His home was looted, helmets and armour were taken, as were half-pikes, muskets, swords, gunpowder and Swedes' feathers, which are the defensive stakes used by musketeers to protect their lines from cavalry. The crowd was angry, and now it was well armed. By 2 p.m, the crowds converged on Committee House. The building was seen as a symbol of Parliament's authority. It housed the main arsenal for the County Arms magazine, an estimated 3,000 arms. The crowd broke through the bolted doors and attacked Parliament's armoury. Samuel Cawthorne, the armourer, shot a local boy in the mayhem, and that only incited the crowd more. Cawthorne was beaten. The rioters then took the opportunity to destroy sequestration and taxation records. But there, in the armoury, was the main prize, nearly 100 barrels full of gunpowder. The situation was spiralling out of control. By 4 p.m, 3 groups of Colonel Charles Fleetwood's Parliamentarian Cavalry Regiment converged on Norwich. They made it into the city through unsecured gates. Everyone was getting in on the action. Even women and young boys participated in the fight against the soldiers. One trooper later testified that a lady called Margaret Secker thrust a spit through the ribs of his horse, while her husband John had struck him with a watch bill. A heavy rain began to fall. Riding through the crowd, the cavalry sent many of the inhabitants scurrying indoors. A firefight developed around Committee House. Shooting back and forth. In the excitement, the rioters were careless with the gunpowder. One person is said to have swept the gunpowder from the stairs with a brush. Another scooped some out of the barrels in his hat and he took it home. No one knows what the actual spark was that set off the explosion. But it happened. 98 barrels of gunpowder went up at once. 40 buildings were destroyed. Contemporary estimates of death vary, but most place it between 80 and as many as 200 people. About 50 metres away from Committee House is the Church of St Peter Mancroft, and one thing you'll pretty quickly notice is there's no stained glass in its windows. If you head inside, what little there is on the sides of the building that faced away from Committee House and were therefore shielded by the heavy stone walls. The result was an absolutely massive clampdown by parliamentary forces on their opponents within the city. 108 people stood trial, 8 of them were executed, 7 were imprisoned and a further 26 were fined £30. 2 people were even whipped. Arting's mayoralty was suspended and parliamentary forces used the situation as an excuse to completely stack the deck of governance within the city. By September 1648, East Anglia was permanently under their control and they never lost it again. The Great Blow of Norwich, a truly explosive little piece of the past.